During his prime, he was the shortest center in the NBA.
He's 6'8", so for him to be the force that he became, battling with those guys.
And yet, they called him Big Ben because nobody messed with him, not even Shaq.
I hadn't seen a guy that really was able to control Shaq like he did one-on-one.
And while O'Neal was often ridiculed for his free throws, it's actually Ben Wallace who's the worst free throw shooter of all time. And he also has the lowest scoring average of all players in the Hall of Fame.
When you talk about put on a hard hat and go to work, you speak of a guy like Ben Wallace. He's definitely deserving to be a Hall of Fame.
But Wallace made the Hall due to a Kobe-like work ethic, warrior spirit, and insane defensive output.
He's a monster.
He's the greatest undrafted player of all time. But how good was Ben Wallace actually?
His journey is as incredible as anyone's I've heard. To take that path, to go that route, it's an amazing story.
And to understand why Big Ben played the way he played, we have to look at his early childhood. Wallace was born in Alabama, in one of the poorest towns in the U.S. He was the second youngest of 11 children in a single-parent household, and from a very early age, he had to work to survive. He worked all kinds of jobs, and was even a local barber. I started cutting hair when I was about 16. Everyone in the neighborhood would come by, and I'd come out on the porch and sit and cut. I'd charge $3 a head. Ben first started playing basketball with his older brothers, but they didn't take him seriously and never passed him the ball. To get the ball, he either had to steal it or out-rebound everybody much taller than him, which would later become a staple of his game. Pretty soon, Ben was dominating against his brothers and high school competition. But not only did he become an all-state athlete in basketball, Wallace also did it in baseball and football, playing linebacker, as well as being a top performer in track and field. Seemingly limitless energy, crazy competitiveness, and unbelievable agility for a tall guy made him dominant in all sports. But due to his limitations on offense and being poor in a small town in Alabama, there was a very high chance that Wallace would only ever be a great high school athlete. But then, in 1992, when Ben was a senior, an opportunity came. Charles Oakley, who was playing for the New York Knicks, held a basketball camp in Livingston, 100 miles from Ben's house. And when he got to the camp, Oakley loved Wallace's energy and determination.
So I went to the camp. I just did what I did. I rebound, block shots, catch the ball in the paint, dunk it, and, everybody was raving like, wow, wow, wow.
So much so that Oakley challenged a high school Ben to a one-on-one game. But as soon as the game started, bam, Oakley punched Ben in the face.
He got the ball, drive to the basket, bam, pulled me in the lip, split my joint. I'm like, that's how you play? He was like, play ball, man. Stop being punk.
Wallace was so used to getting smacked around by his older siblings that he wasn't scared of Oakley at all. So he punched him right back.
So I drive to the basket, bam, tap him, hit him in the mouth. So he's just gonna bowl me in the face like that? Man, shut up, stop being a punk.
Wallace ended up winning that game, and his grit and fearlessness impressed Oak, arguably the meanest center in the NBA. So Oakley took Wallace under his wing, and Ben credits Oakley for shaping him into the player that he later became. Growing up, I wanted to jump like Mike, dribble like Zeke, and shoot like Bird. Not a whole lot of that happened to me, but Charles Oakley told me what to do instead. Oakley steered Wallace to Cuyahoga Community College, near Oakley's childhood home in Cleveland. This level of competition was right on point for Wallace's skill level. Despite his physical dominance, Wallace didn't have much experience in organized basketball, and he needed some game reps. Then, as a sophomore, Ben averaged 24 points, 17 rebounds, and 7 blocks per game. Oakley realized he'd outgrown the competition, so he helped Wallace transfer to his alma mater, Virginia Union. And when he got to Virginia, Wallace's dedication to working out quickly became obvious to the coaching staff, who had to buy more weights for the weight room, because Wallace was bench pressing every weight in the building.
It taught me a lot of discipline. Coming from a Division II program made me realize I have to work harder than others.
In 2 years at VU, Wallace averaged 13 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks per game, leading the team to a Division II Final Four and becoming a first-team All-American. However, unlike his mentor Oakley, who became the 9th overall pick after leaving Virginia Union, Wallace went undrafted in the 1996 NBA draft. Ben was listed at 6'9", but he was really closer to 6'7". And despite his muscular frame and toughness, all the GM saw was an undersized and underskilled player. The Celtics invited Wallace to their training camp,
They invited me to camp. They gave me an opportunity to step on that floor and go against some of the best in the world. So,
But because of his height, they played him as a small forward and even as a shooting guard.
that was a learning experience. It was one of those things where I was put in a position that I didn't feel comfortable with.
Unsurprisingly, the Celtics cut Ben, whose only option was to go to Europe. He landed in Italy, but he only appeared in one game for Viola Reggio Calabria. And even though he stayed less than 2 weeks in Italy, Ben found the experience fulfilling because he learned how to play the game without using his athleticism. And the tighter spaces in Euro basketball helped him with understanding angles and positioning. But then came a call from the NBA. More precisely, from Wes Unseld, the general manager of the Washington Bullets. Unseld was an undersized center who made the Hall of Fame, despite being 6'7", and in Wallace, he saw a glimpse of himself. Although Ben was still a diamond in the rough, Unseld was intrigued by Wallace's physical abilities and decided to bring him to Washington. I owe Wes a lot. If he hadn't invited me, who knows if I would have ever returned from Europe. And sometimes that's all it takes, someone believing in you to help you achieve great things. Which is why this video is brought to you by BetterHelp. With everything going on in the world today, it's more important than ever to prioritize what matters most, yourself. And sometimes there's no better way to take care of yourself than therapy. Therapy offers numerous positive benefits, including improved mental health, enhanced self-awareness, and better coping strategies for life's challenges. Plus, if your favorite sports team is on a losing streak, therapy can help with that too. Beyond that, therapy is great for fostering personal growth and strengthening relationships by improving communication skills. If therapy sounds like something that could be good for you, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you're able to switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com /nonstopsports today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com /nonstopsports. Wallace squeezed onto the roster as the 12th man, earning respect for working extremely hard in practice. He only played in 34 games as a rookie, but despite averaging just 1 point and 2 rebounds in 6 minutes per game, nobody dared to cut him, as there was just something about Wallace, because no other player was so fanatically serious and hardworking in his approach to the game. As a sophomore, Ben played in 67 games, and his playing time increased to 17 minutes per game. But it was in his third year that he got a real chance to shine. In a lockout-shortened 1999 season, Wallace appeared in 46 out of 50 games, playing 27 minutes and averaging 6 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. However, after 3 years of not making the playoffs and Ben only averaging just 3 points per game while shooting a horrendous 35% from the free throw line, the Wizards decided to trade Wallace to Orlando. With the Magic, Ben's numbers didn't improve, but he still had that insane resilience and willingness to compete. For nearly half the season, Ben played with a stress fracture in his foot. He never practiced because he couldn't practice as the pain was so intense. Wallace actually walked around in a medical boot until 25 minutes before the game, and then he'd take it off, play his butt off, only to put the boot back on. While many other players would get surgery, Big Ben played 81 games that year, averaging 8 rebounds and 1.6 blocks in 24 minutes of action. His teammate Monty Williams said, "I was just blown away at that level of commitment and toughness. He'd take that boot off and play like we just started training camp. He was a grinder. You thought you were working, and then you'd go into the weight room, and it looked like Ben had 100 pounds on each side of the dumbbells." Because of his commitment to training, Wallace earned the nickname Body, and he started getting more recognition around the league, not just for his play, but because he began growing out his hair, sporting the biggest afro the NBA had seen since Julius Erving. However, despite his growing popularity, incredible toughness, and defensive masterclass, Big Ben got traded again. In the summer of 2000, Orlando won the Grant Hill sweepstakes, who was considered by many as the best perimeter player in the NBA. Once it was clear that the Pistons would lose Hill without compensation, Detroit suggested a trade to Orlando to help them reduce the salary cap and also get at least something in return for Hill. The Magic agreed, sending away 2 unproven players who they believed were both 4 inches too short to shine at their respective positions, a 5'10" point guard Chucky Atkins and Wallace, who quickly proved that trading him was one of the biggest mistakes in Orlando's history.
I think someone asked him, what type of player are you? And he said, I'm a 6'9", 245-pound guy who believes in tagging the other guy before he even gets to tag me. That's who Ben Wallace is.
In Wallace's first year in Detroit, he became the first player ever to lead the franchise in rebounds, blocks, and steals in the same year, and also the first Piston since Dennis Rodman to grab more than 1,000 rebounds in a season. Off the court, Wallace's special work ethic became obvious to the whole organization. "There is no one in the league that's a bigger warrior than him," said GM Joe Dumars. "He brings an intensity that's second to none and a presence that's infectious." Dumars was a playing legend in Detroit, but he also proved to be one of the smartest executives in the NBA. He quickly realized the monster he had in Big Ben, so he tailored the rest of the team around him, which was unheard of for a guy that averages just 6 points per game. In the 2001-2002 season, the Pistons hired a new coach, Rick Carlisle, who decided to use Wallace as a help defender, which let him leave his man to block shots and rebound, knowing another teammate would rotate and pick up his man.
When we used to go out there and play on defense, he used to always tell me, "Look here, Rip, if you get beat, don't foul your guy, because I'll be there to block his shot."
And the results were astonishing. Big Ben averaged 13 rebounds and 3.5 blocks per game, and became one of only 4 players in NBA history at the time to lead the entire league in rebounds and blocks, winning Kareem, Hakeem, and Bill Walton, who were all several inches taller than Wallace. Largely due to Ben's defensive prowess, the Pistons improved from 32 wins to 50, and Wallace won Defensive Player of the Year, receiving 116 of 120 possible first-place votes.
He comes with a tremendous effort. He plays with tremendous heart. I mean, you guys see that every night.
In the playoffs, the Pistons defeated the Raptors in the first round, their first series win in 11 years, but then immediately lost in the second round to the Celtics, despite Big Ben's 17 rebounds per game. Game 3 of that series, which finished 66-64 for Boston, was the lowest scoring game in NBA playoff history. For the 2003 season, Joe Dumars traded the majority of the starting 5, bringing in Chauncey Billups, Richard Hamilton, and drafting Tayshaun Prince. One of Dumars' main goals was to seek out players with characters similar to Big Ben. This team has been built in the image of Ben for sure. We're hardworking and we don't complain. Everything we do starts with him. Having Ben is a great luxury, and we flat out love him in Detroit.
You outwork everybody. You're the last one to leave the gym, and everybody knows that at the end of the day, the only thing that you really care about is winning.
With his new teammates, Wallace kept improving, leading the league in rebounds with 15.4 boards per game and repeating as Defensive Player of the Year.
You know, when you come here and you see his work ethic, you know, and you see what he means to the team and what he means to the game out there, seeing how he can just dominate an entire game without making one basket. It's phenomenal, man. It's phenomenal. I had never seen that before.
Ben also became an All-Star for the first time, but a week before the All-Star game, he suffered a huge tragedy. Months after she finally accepted to move into a new house that Ben bought for her, his mother Sadie collapsed in a grocery store and died shortly after.
Our hearts go out to Ben Wallace. It's been a very tough week for the young Detroit Pistons center because last weekend, his mother Sadie died.
Ben was crushed, but he decided to still participate in All-Star Weekend, becoming the first undrafted player to start in the All-Star Game. After that, Ben played like a man possessed. Wallace was averaging 14.5 rebounds prior to the All-Star break, but after his mother's death, Ben averaged 16.9 boards over the final 29 games, including an 8-game streak with over 21 rebounds per game. In a March game against the Celtics, Ben grabbed a career-high 28 rebounds with 6 blocks, while the entire Celtics team had 30 rebounds. In the playoffs, Big Ben continued to crash the glass and improved his numbers from the regular season. In the first round against Orlando, Wallace averaged 11 points, 18 rebounds, and 3 blocks to help the Pistons advance after 7 games. In the conference semis, Detroit defeated Allen Iverson and the 76ers in 6 games, but they would then get swept in the conference finals by the Nets. Ben averaged 16 rebounds, 2.5 steals, and 3 blocks for the playoffs, showing unreal defensive versatility. In the 2003 NBA draft, the Pistons famously drafted Darko Milicic with the number 2 overall pick, in front of Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. This proved to be the biggest mistake of the otherwise great executive career of Joe Dumars. But who knows? If the Pistons had drafted Carmelo, maybe they wouldn't have traded for Rasheed Wallace at the trade deadline. who proved to be the missing piece of the championship puzzle.
Whatever I could bring to the table to help us make that gallop for that title cup, that's what I'm gonna do.
With a revamped roster and a new coach in Larry Brown, Big Ben benefited tremendously. Because with Sheed and Mehmet Okur, the Pistons finally had big guys to help Ben fight against the NBA's 7-footers. And even though the Pistons had the 18th best offense, below the league average, their defense was so good that they still had the second best net rating in the NBA. In the first round of the playoffs, Detroit easily got past the Bucks, with Big Ben leading both teams in rebounds, blocks, and steals, a feat he repeated in the second round against the Nets. Detroit avenged the sweep from the previous season and got past the two-time reigning East champions after 7 games. In the conference finals against Indiana, the Pacers took Game 1 and nearly Game 2. If it weren't for Tayshaun Prince and his unreal chase-down block on Reggie Miller, reminiscent of LeBron's block on Andre Iguodala. With 15 rebounds and over 3 blocks in the series, Ben Wallace dominated the paint, limiting the Pacers to just 72 points per game in the series, which is something teams score in one half nowadays. Thanks to their defensive wall and Rip Hamilton scoring, the Pistons won the series in 6, advancing to their first NBA Finals since 1990. However, in the finals, the mighty LA Lakers awaited, who Vegas picked to win the title with 87% probability. But the Pistons didn't think so, and immediately in Game 1, they threw the first punch, convincingly beating the Lakers in LA.
We're a team that, we never scared. We're going to go out there and play and have each other's back, and that's what we did tonight.
The Lakers tied the series in Game 2, but when the series moved to Detroit, the Pistons embarrassed them, winning Game 3 by 20 points. Wallace was instrumental in this victory, limiting Shaq to just 14 points and 8 rebounds, as he was the only human on the planet who could guard O'Neal one-on-one.
He's not afraid of Shaq. What's the worst that Shaq can do to you? Dunk on you. Ben wasn't afraid to stick his chest out there, stick his face in there, got hit with a couple elbows, so I think it was his heart that made the difference.
And even though Shaq bounced back in Game 4 with 36 points and 20 rebounds, the Pistons still won the game 88-80. Because of Wallace, Detroit was the only team that didn't double Shaq, which meant the Lakers' role players didn't get many open looks. And other than O'Neal, LA shot 25% from the field in Game 4. In Game 5, Big Ben played arguably the best game of his life.
Payton in the lane, Ben with a steal. Ben driving ahead of the crowd, up for the flying flood. Ben Wallace strikes again.
With 18 points, 22 rebounds, and 3 steals in a blowout win, as the Pistons won the title, producing one of the biggest upsets in NBA history.
Your 2004 NBA champion Detroit Pistons. Congratulations, and here's the trophy.
We went out and we worked hard. We never gave up. We never hung our head. We continued to work and we pulled it off in there. To be able to put it off here at home in front of this home crowd, it's a great feeling.
The Lakers averaged just 82 points per game in the finals, down from the 98 they averaged in the regular season. Shaq had one of the worst rebounding series of his career against Big Ben, averaging just 11 rebounds to Wallace's 13, despite being 5 inches taller and 100 pounds heavier. And even though Chauncey Billups deservingly won the Finals MVP after shooting 50-40-90 in the finals and becoming the first player on a winning team with that accomplishment, Ben Wallace's contribution to the title was probably the greatest of any Detroit player. Wallace led all players in the playoffs in rebounds, he was second in blocks behind Shaq, and was also the playoff leader in steals, which is unheard of for a big man. And then, in 2005, Big Ben continued to wreak havoc in the paint, making the All-Star team and winning his 3rd Defensive Player of the Year award. Despite averaging just 9.7 points per game, which was his career high, Ben became one of the most popular players in the league, with hundreds of fans showing up to games with headbands and afro wigs. Wallace was in the middle of the most devastating brawl in NBA history, Malice at the Palace, which started after Ben's scuffle with Ron Artest, who was probably the only person crazy enough to mess with Ben. For his contribution to the fight, Ben received a 6-game suspension. But when the playoffs came, the Pistons were ready to roll. Detroit made quick work of the Sixers and the Pacers in the first 2 rounds, and in the conference finals, Big Ben once again got the better of Shaq, who was now playing in Miami. Detroit advanced to the finals after 7 games, where another gritty, defensive-minded team awaited, the San Antonio Spurs. It was one of the most defensive-oriented finals ever. with neither team averaging more than 86 points over 7 games. However, almost every game was a blowout, except for Game 5 and Game 7, which were both won by the Spurs thanks to the all-around brilliance of Tim Duncan, who averaged 20 points, 14 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. It was the first time in Ben Wallace's career that he'd been out-rebounded by another player in a playoff series, even though his defense was still masterful with 3 blocks and 1.7 steals in the finals. In 2006, with a new coach, Flip Saunders, and thanks to the continuity and almost perfect health of their starting 5, Detroit had the best regular season in franchise history, with 64 wins and the best record in the NBA. Big Ben was an All-Star and won his 4th Defensive Player of the Year award, which tied the NBA record with Dikembe Mutombo.
This is my 4th Defensive Player of the Year. I want to win another title. That's my main goal.
The Pistons easily defeated the Bucks in the first round, but LeBron and his Cavs gave them trouble and pushed their second-round series to 7 games. In the deciding game, Detroit suffocated Cleveland, allowing just 61 points, and advanced to the conference finals. However, against the Heat, Shaq finally had his revenge over Ben, and Miami defeated Detroit on their way to the title. In the offseason, Ben was a free agent, and even though everybody loved him in Detroit, Chicago offered more money, so he became a Bull.
I hate to leave, but it's going to be a situation where I got an opportunity to go out and do something different.
However, after his first season in the Windy City and a second-round playoff exit, Wallace got traded to Cleveland. But Big Ben was now on the wrong side of 30. His production steadily dropped, and it was clear that his glory days were behind him. At the age of 35, Big Ben came back to Detroit, where he'd spend the last 3 seasons of his career until his retirement in 2012. Wallace finished his career with 1,369 steals, which is 68th on the all-time NBA list. He is one of only 11 players in NBA history to collect 10,000 rebounds and 2,000 blocks in his career, and is by far the shortest on that list. Ben is one of only 5 players to have more blocks than personal fouls, and the only player among those to have more steals than turnovers. He's also one of 3 players in NBA history to average 15 rebounds and 3 blocks per game over a season, along with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bob McAdoo. Analytically, Wallace is still one of the best defenders to play the game, and sits 5th in the all-time defensive rating and defensive plus-minus. He didn't do flashy things, he never made big shots, and he failed to shoot 50% from the free throw line in every season of his career. But yet, he was one of the smartest and toughest players to ever play, and trying to get to the basket while he was in the lane was borderline impossible. Even though he averaged just 5.7 points per game for his career, Ben Wallace became the first undrafted player to be elected into the Hall of Fame, and rightfully so.
Stand tall, stick your chest out, hold your head up. Now do it again.
Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, we've got another one for you right here.